And that is one hell of a party trick. Girls will never forget you, I promise. Good morning, friends. Have you ever noticed that in porn, some men's erections seem to point more upwards, northwards, and some point more southwards? Well, yesterday, a subscriber asked me whether it's possible to change this angle, and if so, how to do it. Today, I'm going to answer that question, and in doing so, I'm going to explain the mechanisms behind real penis lengthening and achieving true multiple orgasm, multiple ejaculations as a man without losing your erection. By the time you finish this video, you're going to finally understand the mechanisms behind that and be able to do it yourself. But before I tell you all about that, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already, like the video, and comment on the video for the sake of the algorithm. Now let's get started. First of all, why should you listen to me? Well, to be honest with you, I usually don't give advice or protocols about anything that I've not done successfully myself. And in fact, even the pharmacology that I discuss on the channel is rarely regarding pharmacology that I haven't experienced myself. I like to talk both from a place of experience and knowledge. I don't like to do one or the other usually. And in fact, I think this is one of the reasons that my channel is valuable, because many psychiatrists and doctors, for example, have never experienced either the illnesses they treat or use the drugs that they use to treat the illnesses. So oftentimes they can't relate to their patients' experiences. Though you may be surprised to know it, I am one of the world's foremost experts in penis enlargement, PE, something I dedicated a lot of time to researching earlier in my years. Although I try not to get too personal on the channel, I would like you to know that using the methods I describe in my 2 pumping videos and using the methods I describe in this video, I was able to gain over 2 inches in length. And in fact, I stopped doing these exercises completely for at least a decade and was able to determine what was long-lasting and what wasn't, and what was real gains in length and what wasn't. These are things many people in this field don't know because they've never tried it. And what I determined was the length gains that I got that were permanent were purely due to the methods I describe in this video. Next, let's talk about anatomy. We need to establish some definitions for the discussion. The first thing is that the exit point of your penis is the point at the top of the penis. That the top layer of the penis is called the corpus cavernosum. The point at the base of the top of your penis is called the exit point in this discussion. And in fact, the exit point is often the most determining factor in the differential responses to penis lengthening, in that the higher the exit point, the more potential lengthening someone has. On the other hand, the erection angle, what I'll call the erection angle here, is the angle to which the penis points, either more northward or more southward. And this is not the point that you achieve, for example, if you're peeing and you try to stop your urine. You're pulling your pelvic floor muscles together. That's sort of like what they call a Kegel. We're not talking about the angle when you're doing a Kegel. We're talking about the angle when resting. Next, we need to talk about connective tissue. It's all about the connective tissue on and around your penis. So at the top of your penis, you have something called the suspensory ligament. The suspensory ligament is what most people think determines the exit point. But in fact, there are other connective tissues wrapped around your penis that are poorly defined in anatomical literature. I mainly know about them because I have actually stretched all of them and experienced it and felt the ligaments stretching. I could palpate them with my hand eventually. These ligaments became long and big. So the consequences of having a certain exit point, really, are that they determine how much you can lengthen your penis, because there are no true permanent lengthening of the actual penis. What happens instead is that we stretch the connective tissue both from the sides and the bottom and the top, so that the penis exits at a lower point, which is what we colloquially call the inner penis. In that when you stretch out these ligaments over time, you gain inches in length of your penis, but your exit point also drops. So how do exit points differ across us? There are some people that have very high exit points. In particular, I've noticed that it does seem to vary ethnically, in that East Asians tend to have much higher exit points, whereas people from African descent, for example, tend to have lower exit points. The lower your exit point is, the less potential you have to extend your penis permanently. Of course, this is not absolute. It's relative to your total size and your penile length, but as a proportion of your total penile length, the higher up the exit point, the more potential you have to lengthen it. Let's talk about the suspensory ligament next. So the suspensory ligament, as it's named, suspends the penis in that position of the exit point, giving it more stability and preventing it from extending further. The suspensory ligament is attached to the base of your penis, though you might not know it because the base of your penis is more inside you than mine is. To understand what stretching the suspensory ligament feels like, stand up and try to take your penis between your legs at what we call the between the cheeks or BTC angle. What that really is make the glands or head of your penis point directly behind you while standing. You can do that by holding the penis and pulling it behind you. If you pull it slowly and for a while, you'll first feel a stretch on your skin. And in fact, by the way, that's one of the things you have to do first. You have to stretch the skin on the fat pad. That will be the first limiting factor in actually getting to the suspensory ligament. So first, you'll feel tension on the skin, but that will go away within a couple of weeks at maximum. And then you'll start to feel an ache ache at the base of your penis at the top. That ache is the suspensory ligament being stretched over time. Next, let's talk about stretching. What is stretching the suspensory ligament? What does it do? Well, if you guys have watched my videos on pumping, the methodology behind pumping is exactly opposing the methodology of stretching. If you haven't seen my pumping videos, I suggest you return to them only after you've completed your goals in terms of stretching your penis. With stretching, there are two keys. One is that you never want to use too much force, and the second is that you want to do it almost all the time. First, the force. What you're trying to do is stretch the tissue that it's not stretching the penis. Don't think of it that way. You're stretching the connective tissue that's holding the penis. So the connective tissue is a short suspensory ligament there. Your goal is to stretch that suspensory ligament at the perfect angle, which is actually behind you, sort of. The perfect angle with the least amount of force that takes you to the maximal extension. What that means is if you find that you increase the weight, for example, in a hanger, or if you were stretching manually, unfortunately, and using your hand, if you increase the force and your ligament didn't have any more give, you shouldn't have increased the force. If you do, the ligament will get stronger and it will develop fibrotic deposits that make it thicker and harder to stretch over time. So your goal is to get it to the maximally stretched position and basically keep it there 24/7. Until you've achieved your goals, of course. But this is a little bit inefficient. What I found is that after a few hours of stretching during the day, the results or the effect on your results decline in a non-linear fashion, such that an hour is really efficient, 2 hours is still efficient, 3 hours is still efficient, but going from 6 to 9 hours is not that efficient unless you do some things wrong, which I'll get to later. And note that while I say stretching, I'm talking about the mechanism. I'm not suggesting that you stretch manually like many people do. That is extremely inefficient. The most efficient way is to stretch with a hanger, with weights, with light weights, and then later in the day potentially to use an all-day stretcher, but only in the home. The way I described using an all-day stretcher in a former pumping video. And not using any kind of all-day stretcher except a vacuum stretcher, which again, you're not using all day. Anyway, refer to my former pumping video to learn more about how I recommend using an all-day stretcher. So again, to repeat, throughout this video when I say stretching, I really mean hanging. This is the opposite of the technique toward pumping. You see, pumping relies mainly on angiogenesis, not on the plastic change of collagenous tissue, and therefore it's not about stretching the tissue and making it mold that way plastically. Instead, it's about receiving a stimulus and letting the penis heal and enlarge over time through factors like vascular endothelial factor and hypoxia related factors and other factors that are certainly at play in the results that come from pumping. Pumping is actually a lot like weightlifting. You want to give it a stimulus and then you want to take some time off. The ideal pumping schedule is not more than once a day, and I think probably the most efficient one is not more than 20 or 30 minutes a day. If you pump excessively, you will actually get worse results, and how you'll notice this, by the way, is that you'll get less morning erections the next day. That means your penis is under some kind of serious stress. Like weightlifting, as a natural at least, you'll get all of the gains that you can experience from pumping within a year and a half, at which point you can probably maintain it with a single or maybe 2 20-minute sessions a week at maximum. On the other hand, with hanging, you don't have to maintain anything. It will never go away if you do it right. It might retract very slightly temporarily, maybe a quarter of an inch, but it will never go back completely. Next, back to stretching. I want to give you 3 tips on the subject. The first is don't ever let your penis retract properly during the period of your hanging, which will probably be 2 to 6 months if you're doing it efficiently. What do I mean by retraction? Well, there's a couple of examples. One happens, and it's a minor one, after ejaculation, particularly during sex. I don't think that one should ejaculate too much in the first few months of hanging. But that's not as important as avoiding the real kinds of retraction, which could happen from either injury to the penis or, for example, going in a cold shower. You see, when you get in the cold, your body produces adrenaline signaling. Adrenaline constricts blood vessels. And when the blood vessels around and in the penis are constricted, the penis actually physically gets a little bit closer to the body. So the suspensory ligament is no longer elongated. It has some space. And then it will go a little bit back. Trust me, this is from trial and experience, not stuff I've read elsewhere. In fact, this retraction in the cold of the blood vessels and thus the penis could be one of the reasons to explain why some introverted or anxious or neurotic people may have more tightly wound penises. Imagine that you're just slightly more adrenergic your whole childhood and teenage years. Your ligament will never be as stretched as it would have been otherwise, and probably it will form in a shorter position. Anyway, if your penis does retract, you'll have to stretch it for at least half an hour afterwards to get it again in the elongated position. I'm not talking again about the penis. You're stretching the penis, but you're really trying to get to the connective tissue. You want it to settle in the stretched position at all times. Even though it's not fully extended, you want it to be somewhat extended. If it retracts, you reverse some of the work you did during that day, and you may make that ligament stronger over time. And in fact, that's another good point. That's one of the reasons why you should not do this inefficiently. You should listen to exactly what I say if you do this, so that you can accomplish the full lengthening within 2 to 6 months. I tell you, I could have done it within 2 months if I knew what I know now. And the advantage of that is you accomplish the task quickly, let the connective tissue heal without them getting stronger and limiting your full potential of getting them lengthened. Second, as I mentioned earlier, never use more force for stretching than is needed to completely elongate the target tissue. You'll be able to feel palpably whether the tissue is elongated, and you'll be able to know if you're truly stretching it because it will ache. It'll feel slightly sore within 20 minutes of accessing the right tissue with the right force. Within 20 to 40 minutes maximum, you're going to feel that it's sore, and that ache will stay with you for several hours and will remain there if you touch it for the rest of the day. It will stay like that for a month or a month and a half before that ache starts to go away a bit, but at least you know which tissue you're targeting, and the ache will come back when you target other tissues. And that brings me to my third point, which is that the rate limiting connective tissue to bringing your exit point lower will change over time, such that in the beginning, the BTC angle that I mentioned before, which is straight behind you basically when you're standing. And by the way, how do you do that when you're sitting? You basically have to sit in a very awkward position with your back down on some kind of reclining chair in which your legs are on top of a desk and the hanger is pulling directly below you. So it's essentially almost at that perfect angle. Ideally, you wouldn't even have it going straight back. It would be behind you and northwards. So the reverse of the angle is exactly what you want. But anyway, once you use the BTC angle if you're doing it properly, for a month or so, it will no longer be the rate limiting step. You'll have to stretch other connective tissue that's not at the top, not the suspensory ligament, but sort of to the sides of the penis initially. And then later, as you go lower and lower, there will be more connective tissue. The way you do this is that as you're using the BTC angle, at some point you'll no longer get sore there, but what you'll notice is that there's something else is holding it. And how you'll find out if those things are primed to be stretched is by trying downwards to the left and downwards to the right angle. If you do that, if you're hitting the right target tissue, it will be very sore. You'll feel the soreness immediately, as if you began the BTC angle all over again, except these connective tissues are much lighter, so they're also much easier to stretch. So what you'll need to do is switch between a downward right and a downward left angle. You'll have to explore to see the positions that feel the most sore to you, to the connective tissue. You'll start to get a feeling for it. One tip, never use an angle that goes upwards. An angle that goes upwards is completely inefficient and only used by people because of their misunderstanding. This has been due to some misinformation spread over time and so on, but the actual penis cannot gain real length. Only the connective tissue can expand. Your penis can gain elastic length. That happens from pumping and it happens from hanging. Pumping is more efficient for it, but that length goes away with time. What I'm talking about is permanent. So basically, after a month or so, you'll have to keep changing your hanging angle, working on one place, dividing and conquering, working on the rate limiting step. It'll go from the suspensory ligament to side ligament. Then when the side ligaments stretch, the suspensory ligament will be able to be accessed again. Your goal is really mainly the suspensory ligament, but you have to stretch the side one so that you can get to it. Next, I want to offer you 2 indicators, physical anatomical indicators, to know that you're doing the right job, other than the soreness that you feel directly there and other than the actual lengthening of your penis. The first is that the erection angle of your penis will begin to tilt a little bit more downwards. This will depend, of course, the end angle will depend, of course, on where you began with. But if your angle in the beginning was above horizontal, it'll probably only settle at around horizontal at maximum. It will get to a certain limiting angle. There's only so far it can go. When you get there, you're done. But that will only happen when you connect the small connective tissue on the bottom as well. If you don't notice the angle of erection going down, you're not doing it right. And this should happen completely within 2 to 6 months. Note that every man can gain some length, but the amount that you can gain depends. But no matter what, your erection angle will go down somewhat. So if it doesn't, then you're doing something really wrong. For example, maybe you're using 50 pounds and strengthening the ligaments, or you're swinging the weights around like we used to. We made all the mistakes so that you don't have to make these mistakes. I'm saving you a lot of trouble. Second, if you do it properly like I did, with this increased width, you'll be able to actually see, for example, the suspensory ligament attachment point on the penis. It may not be visible to girls that you date or something like that, but you'll notice it. There'll be a slight bulge at the top base of your penis. And in fact, if you do it very well and completely like I did, and you had a lot of potential, what you'll notice is you'll be able to palpate the suspensory ligament at the base of your penis. You'll be able to feel its connection point. You'll be able to palpate the ligament completely. Before we move on, I want to warn you about surgery. penile surgery is highly dangerous. The surgery I'm talking about is actually cutting the suspensory ligament. This isn't as dangerous as other surgeries, which often have horror stories. I've read hundreds of horror stories. Although I personally didn't consider getting a surgery, there was a thread in the old Thunder's place where people reported their surgical experiences. It was horrific. Hundreds and hundreds of horrible experiences years later, not necessarily right after the surgery. But the simpler surgery, not those ones for girth and stuff, but the simpler surgery to cut the suspensory ligament is also completely inefficient. You can get complete lengthening of the suspensory ligament if you have the patience. And the difference is now you'll at least have that added girth at the top, it's not cut, and you'll have the stability of having the suspensory ligament, but with your penis pointing at a proper angle. Moreover, once they do the surgery to cut the suspensory ligament, they don't remove all of the other connective tissue there, otherwise your penis would never be able to point in the right direction. So they don't do that. You'll still have to stretch all of that out if you want the maximal gains, but instead now you'll have a destabilized penis and feel stupid for doing this unnecessarily. Don't get a surgery on your penis no matter what. Even if you have a micro penis, don't do it. So that answers how you can make your erection angle point a little bit lower. If you do what I'm saying, as the exit point goes lower, your erection angle will also go lower. So that's how you can manipulate that. Thankfully, that has pleiotropic effects on the size of your penis, so it's quite valuable. Now, what about making the penis point more northwards? The only way that you can do that after you've done what I just said, other than making the tissues retract, which you would never want to do, is by really strengthening the pelvic floor muscles. Those are the muscles used to perform what are called Kegel exercises. When you strengthen the pelvic floor muscles, you'll be able to flex your penis while it's erect to make it go much higher, and you'll be able to do this very easily. In fact, strengthening these muscles will have pleiotropic effects on your sex life. For example, you'll be able to, if you do what I say, flex your penis while having sex with a girl, so much so that you will feel it really potently. And in fact, there's another even more wonderful effect. If you do this exercise the way I describe it, it's an exercise I created, by the way, the next exercise. If you do it properly, you'll be ready for a future video I do on how to achieve multiple orgasms and multiple ejaculations without losing your erection. If you don't have very strong pelvic floor muscles, you will not be able to do it. And that is one hell of a party trick. Girls will never forget you, I promise, if you ejaculate 9 times without losing your erection, having sex for 3 hours or so, which I've done before. So should you do aerobics for your pelvic floor muscles? Some of these sex experts, or maybe they should be called sexperts, may have this ridiculous suggestion that you should just sit and do like 30 repetitions of squeezing the pelvic floor muscles, the way you would if you wanted to stop urination, for example. Just do 30 repetitions of it, do aerobics exercises. This will have no significant effect on your sex life. This is more of a neurological training pathway, just to be able to feel the muscles. It will not do anything supraphysiologic for you. You will not have any party tricks. You will not impress anyone. You can liken it to the effects of doing like aerobics training, dancing with some ladies in the morning, preparing for a bench press competition. Instead, you need proper resistance exercise to be able to strengthen the pelvic floor muscles to do anything really incredible. In order to do this myself, I invented my own exercise in around 2008. At the time on Thunder's Place, a PE forum that was really popular back in the day, there was a manufacturer who was selling what he called PE penis weights. What these were are circular round weights that were lead covered with plastic or rubber or something like that. His thought was that these would be a great all-day stretcher, hanging on the penis, extending the penis, and stretching it out all day. He was in fact completely wrong. I mean, if you're using it as an all-day stretcher, because if you are, you're walking around, and if you're walking around, your penis is gonna have sort of a bounce to it. Over time, this is going to cause those ligaments to get thicker and stronger, and it to be harder for you to stretch it out. And also, this has no effect on flaccid length that's lasting. It's only a short-term effect, and in fact, you could get just as good an effect on flaccid length by pumping or by using an all-day stretcher that's a vacuum device. But you guys know how much of an obsessive person I am when I'm interested in something, and at that time I was very interested in this subject. So of course I bought the weights anyway, tried them myself, realized that it was not efficient, but then I realized that they could be used for something else. You see, by this point I had already pumped a lot, and because of pumping for over a year or so, I developed incredible erectile quality. I mean, for you guys that don't know this, if you're ever having sex with a woman and you get up to stand to move positions and you lose some of your erection, you could completely avoid this if you had pumped for around a year and a half and gotten the maximal gains. At that point, you'll be able to exit a girl, walk around the room, have a sandwich, and go back into her. Anyway, at the time I had great erectile quality, which allowed me to do what I'm about to describe to you. Maybe some of you can't do this yet. But what I did here was I used one weight at a time, initially just one weight toward the end of the penis. And what I did was stand up with an erection, put the the weight on the end of the penis and flex the PC muscle so that the penis would extend northwards. So I was literally lifting weights with my penis. I found out over time that 2 to 3 sets a day was most efficient, and skipping days was not efficient. I think this is because these muscles are quite small, so they get taxed easily, but they heal quickly over a couple of days, over the nighttime, I mean. Anyway, since you'll have poor neurological control and poor strength in the beginning, you'll have to use less weight. In fact, you might do this initially with no weight, like those sexperts advise. But after that, you'll use a light weight and use higher repetitions. Then you'll be able to increase the weight and use lower repetitions, which is where you get very strong and very capable and develop the super physiologic kind of ability. Within a matter of weeks, I became much stronger, to the point where I ran out of space, honestly, to use more rings. I had used all the amount of rings that I could fit on the length of my penis. And at that point, I developed another device that I had to add on top of the weights, with like a noose around it and a bag in which I could put more weights into it. Anyway, at that point, you'll be able to do 2 things. You'll be able to raise your penis at will very easily. And in fact, I mentioned earlier, you'll be able to also flex your penis in a woman and she'll feel it, especially if you pump. You'll have much more angiogenesis in the area, so you'll have more potential to force blood in the area, and you'll be able to really make women feel it whenever you flex that muscle. And finally, and most importantly, you'll be able to use the multiple ejaculation protocol that I'll describe in a future video. If you see it now without training yourself, you really won't be able to get to 9 ejaculations like I could. Now, before we recap, I want to warn you about the PE world. Don't go and trust everything you see online in the different sites for PE. There are a lot of bizarre characters on these websites. Some of them are con men who are driven by commercial interests. In fact, the bib hanger, which I recommend, is made by a guy that I believe is a liar. However, he made a good device. And that's one of the problems about these people. Some of them have half-truths, so you can never really know what they're really trying to say. As I said, some are motivated by commercial interests, while others are motivated by a social insecurity of some kind, such that they go on internet forums, don't know the people, but for example, they want to develop credibility and esteem and a leadership position in this community. For example, there was a guy, I'm forgetting his name, but this guy claimed to have gained something like 6 inches in length. A bib did as well. These two were very influential early members of Thunder's Place, and both, I believe, proper liars. One, Bib, was motivated by commercialism, while this other guy never sold anything. He said he was an agoraphobic person who stayed at home all day, and he was just sitting and lying to us all day, really confusing us and wasting our time. And there was Big Gertha also. You may find his old posts on Thunder's Place. Big Gertha was also, I believe, a liar that was telling half-truths constantly and really confusing me. In fact, I wasted a lot of time clamping because of him, and I should have been pumping. Anyway, the point is, don't trust anything you hear on those forums unless you see evidence, and don't even trust evidence if it shows less than a 2-inch gain in either dimension, because a 2-inch gain can easily be gained by elastic changes to the penis that happen temporarily from pumping. Some odd people will over pump their penis to show temporary gains and then take pictures of it, and if you're a novice, you won't be able to recognize this with your eyes. Oh, by the way, I should mention something. You can I don't know if I've ever mentioned that before. You can over pump your penis to have temporary gains. Not just the gains from angiogenesis that go away with 2 or 3 years. Those are real gains, but you'll actually get lymphatic fluid buildup, and some people pass this off as real size. A lot of porn stars do this, by the way. You'll notice them because they'll have an unusually small glands at the end of the penis, and their penis will look almost like it has fat in it. Spongy. Anyway, generally don't trust anything you read online, on forums, or any of those places. I've explored, I'm telling you, every single possible way to do this. Every single way. And I'm just telling you the most efficient way. So for example, there's a new method called the Angian method. That's not superior to pumping and hanging either. I'm sure. I've tried similar methods. There are many other methods. If I don't mention something to you guys, it's not that useful. Or at the very least, it's suboptimal. The most optimal thing is to first hang and then pump. That's the most optimal thing for sure. So to recap, first, don't manual stretch. Go straight to hanging. No manual stretching. It's not efficient. I'll make another video on why gelking is actually harmful. Second, always focus on plastically remodeling your collagenous tissue before, that is the connective tissue, before you try to focus on angiogenesis, the birth of new blood vessels in your penis. That means hanging before pumping. Third, the most efficient way to lower the angle of your penis is through hanging, which is also the most efficient way to lengthen your penis. And fourth, the most efficient way to raise the angle of your penis is through strengthening the pelvic floor muscles. And if you do it with resistance, like I did, you'll be able to do super physiological things in bed. Anyway, guys, I made all the mistakes so you guys don't have to. Learn from my mistakes, take the most efficient route. You can certainly increase the size of your penis. There's 3 kinds of increases. There's a short-term, 1-month-long kind of elastic change, which happens from both hanging and pumping, for example. And then there's a long-term change that lasts about 2 to 3 years if you stop it. This is mostly composed of the birth of new new blood vessels, but may include some slight amounts of other tissue as well. And then there's a permanent change which comes from the stretching of the connective tissue. This is permanent. It might decline by a very small amount, maybe 10 to 30%, but it won't go past that. You will permanently have a longer penis. Anyway, friends, I hope this was helpful for you, and I'll see you this afternoon.